by this feature of stories and storytelling. And if you think about it, we all need a hero. We all need someone to aspire towards. I remember in my earlier days of my youth, I used to have celebrity have a poster of something called the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but there's 4 characters there, and I got to know their names. Only later discovered that they're actually after famous painters, but nonetheless, at that time, I was really into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And my mom used to have a vacuum cleaner. I'm sure she still does, but she had this vacuum cleaner that was of a pipe, and I used to take that pipe, I used to open it up, and then it became my swords and my stick for fighting. And just like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles used to fight, I used to fight, imagining that I was one of them. I used to eat pizza because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles used to eat pizza. And everything was about them, these 4 interesting little characters and their master, Splinter. And my brother used to take me out, and when we used to go watch movies or hire a movie back in those days, I used to always get the same movie. He used to get Jean-Claude Van Damme martial art movies, and I got this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was totally my, fantasy, and kind of, it really enraptured my world. And everybody has a story of, whether it be through Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, the world has been presenting so many different accounts of different histories and stories that have captivated humanity for many, many years, for centuries, practically speaking. And there's always something that we're looking to talk about. It's natural that the human beings want to speak about the latest news or the latest Skinner, the latest hot topic of what happened here and there. You can look at the way social media is constructed, the way we communicate through movies, books, through our different forms of storytelling, music. Everything is about this journey of a character, what they represent, what they stand for, and how we can become a part of that by hearing and remembering them, and being standing up for that different character and establishment in certain ways. And we start to imbibe their qualities and characters, as you may see, different soccer teams start to, especially in certain parts of the world. I don't know what it's like in America with the football and baseball, but there's almost like a tribalism around, the team that you stand for, and the characters that they are representing, and you kind of have this distinction between 2 parties of who we are and who we represent. I remember there was a famous cricketer called Jonty Rhodes back in my day. I don't know if you guys know about cricket, but it's this interesting, I think the original baseball form of sports. And basically, Jonty Rhodes used to love bananas, and he used to love running around the cricket field before the game. And, our team in our early years of school, we loved Jonty Rhodes so much that we all used to have a banana before the game and run around the field. And so we see it's just so natural for humans to worship and adore someone, to glorify and to appreciate someone, and more so to talk about that person and to imbibe the stand know that it's not wrong. It is not something that we necessarily should stop, or that we should try and abandon or renounce, but it's more about hearing the right kind of stories and finding the right kind of heroes that are really going to help us ultimately transform our character and take us into another, ultimate destination. Because we can categorically say that the stories that are of this world, made of this world, and of the characters of this world, they live and die with this world, but also they condition us to the modes of nature. But when it comes to stories that have been given to us by the Acharyas, by the Krishna consciousness movement, the Vedic literatures, and Srila Prabhupada, these are stories that are of an ultimate reality, stories that can do this, have the same effect of capturing our attention and our consciousness, but now they will elevate our minds and hearts, and they will ultimately take the consciousness away from material energy. So if I can share my screen, I'd like to show everybody a very famous verse here. It is in the first chapter of the first canto, chapter 1, canto 1, text 19. You can see the screen if you like. And here is a moment that is really fascinating in world history. It is where the sages of Naimisharanya have addressed a famous sage known as Sutta Goswami. And they are asking him to please explain to them what is the ultimate good for all humanity and what is the essence of all the scriptures. As we all know that sometimes it's hard to get your head around all the texts and all the different shastras out there. So what is the easiest understandable thing that we can know? So they were asking questions. First two were ultimate was about the essence of all scriptures. And then they wanted to know specifically about Krishna. They wanted to know why Krishna appeared in this world and what was his activities. And they wanted Sutta to describe all the avatars, and they wanted him to describe all the manifestations of Krishna in this world, how he forms his different creation, how he incarnates into various species of life. And then ultimately, they wanted to know, now that Krishna had left the planet, where were they to go to get that connection? The question was, where does religion now reside? Where can we go to now that Krishna has left? And so they set up these 6 big questions in the first chapter. And then they said something very interesting, which is what I want to highlight today. Vayam tu na vitrupyama uttama shloka vikrame yatrivatang rasagyanam svadu svadu pade pade. Now, we may have heard some of these terms before. Uttama shloka is a very famous word that's used many times, and swadu swadu pade pade is also something my own spiritual master likes to recite many times. So it says here, we never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with him relish hearing of his pastimes at every moment. So they're actually sitting there. It's said to be a 1,000-year sacrifice, and they were doing many things. Actually, all their body was covered in soot from the swaha yagyas that were going on, and they couldn't really find the answer that they were looking for. So Sutta was the one that was going to bring it to them. And they were very deeply concerned about the welfare for humanity coming into this next age. And they were basically setting up the stage for the Bhagavatam to be spoken, because they are now going to hear from Sutta, who will ultimately tell them the story between Shukadeva and Parikshit. And here they're saying that, we don't tire of hearing these pastimes of the Lord because it is of a different character. And here it's said that those who have developed a taste, when there is it says here, rasa jnanam, that when there's like some interest in this transcendental subject, it becomes more and more interesting as one reads it. Now, Srila Prabhupada is going to take us through very nicely in this purport. There is a great difference between mundane stories, fiction or history, and the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The histories of the whole universe contain references to the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas are histories of bygone ages recorded in connection with the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord, and therefore remain fresh even after repeated readings. For example, anyone may read Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam repeatedly throughout his whole life, and yet find in them new light of information. Mundane news is static, whereas transcendental news is dynamic, inasmuch as the spirit is dynamic and matter is static. Those who have developed a taste for understanding the transcendental subject matter are never tired of hearing such narrations. One is quickly satiated by mundane activities, but no one is satiated by transcendental or devotional activities. Uttama Shloka indicates that literature which is not meant for nescience. Mundane literature is in the mode of darkness or ignorance, whereas transcendental literature is quite different. Transcendental literature is above the mode of darkness, and its light becomes more luminous with progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. Transcendental literature is above the mode of darkness, and its light becomes more luminous with the progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. The so-called liberated persons are never satisfied by the repetitions of the words Aham Brahmasmi. Such artificial realization of Brahman becomes hackneyed, and so to relish real pleasure, they turn to the narrations of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Those who are not so fortunate turn to altruism and worldly philanthropy. This means the Mayavad philosophy is mundane, whereas the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental. Okay, so this is really interesting news Srila Prabhupada is telling us. So he's making this distinction between the mundane news, the news of this world, and the news that is pertaining to the Lord. So the news of this world is oftentimes, it's connected to a character of our times or of history, mundane history. And we see that Prabhupada is saying that there is a limit to how much one can expose one's consciousness to that. For example, I certainly did like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it must be almost 20 years since I really cared to watch or know about them anymore. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Jaunty Rhodes, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, they're not going to save me at the time of death. They're not going to present to me the ultimate reality of an eternal life where I can become free from the modes of nature. And more often than not, we see with many of the celebrities and movies and kind of stories of today, they have a lot more destructive ways of celebrating. You know, it's usually more immoral or certain kinds of different focus that they have in towards sensuality or in towards establishing one's position in this material world. And oftentimes one loses the attention to the soul. Fortunately or unfortunately, Rukmini Devi says, some people make a practice of rereading the Lord of the Rings every year. Well, that may be the case. You know, I don't want to demonize any of these activities, as I will come to explain more and more, especially depending on our service or our different careers and responsibilities. It's just, I feel important for us to distinguish how these what the limitations are and where these stories are ultimately going to bring us. And more importantly, for us who are committed to a process of bhakti, to recognize that we are interested in stories, we're interested in hearing about someone, we're interested in talking about someone, and we want to really direct that attention towards our ultimate welfare. And here it says that this transcendental literature is above the mode of darkness, and its light becomes more luminous with progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. Now, I can imagine that many of you are familiar with our culture, and the last month we just had was Damodar, the Damodar Leela month. It was celebrating Yashoda Damodar pastime, and every day we would sing, you know, we'd sing the Damodar Astakam. And it's amazing that we sing this every single year. We hear the story over and over. Yet if you take the time to notice how there's actually more and more to understand, there's more and more to realize, and there's more and more depth waiting in there to the degree that we can invest our consciousness in it. And not only is it in just the practice or the sadhana of, you know, reading more and more, or the amazing literatures that have been shared about these stories, but Krishna himself starts to reveal his entire personality through the process of hearing about him. And this is something that has been glorified throughout the Bhagavatam itself, in that hearing process really the way in which we touch the Lord. It starts with hearing, and that hearing is shown by the sages at Naimisharanya, approaching sutta in a very respectful and a very mindful way, establishing the scene to hear the pastimes of the Bhagavatam. And Bhagavatam itself is Parikshit Maharaj, who is now cursed to die in 7 days, and he is there to hear. He's there to hear from Shukadev Goswami, and he's stopped everything in the world. He's kind of left his whole kingdom just to sit down and hear. And usually we find the entire Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, the whole story is about devotees going through various experiences that we also can relate to now, and how to take shelter of the Lord, whether it be Parikshit himself, who's cursed to die in 7 days, or we hear about the Pandavas and their journey. We hear from Queen Kunti, how she's going through so many troubles, but when she could hear and remember the Lord, that is when she could find a great sense of security and shelter. We see through Prahlad Maharaj, through all the avatars that come, they come to protect the devotees, to establish Dharma, to connect and showcase these wonderful pastimes to humanity. And even right up until the 10th canto, there's a demon coming every day into Vrindavan Dham, and the devotees are having to take shelter of the Lord. So we can see that even on the most highest level, the practice of taking shelter and seeing Krishna behind all things is always there. And these wonderful stories, sometimes Bhagavatam shows us intergalactic, stories, are really exciting. They're insightful. There's a lot to learn from them as a principle of guiding our lives as devotees, but more so just the sound vibration. The sound is just like the Hare Krishna mantra. It is purifying the consciousness and awakening our higher loving nature. The sound of Krishna Katha is so cathartic, so transformational, that we need to make an effort to try and expose the consciousness to this more and more, so that we can develop our relationship with the Lord. So here Prabhupada is making the point that there's this distinction between literature that's composed of the modes of nature, and there's a distinction between literature that is of a completely different spiritual energy. And he even says at the end here, which is interesting, that even those who are impersonalists, they get bored or frustrated, limited in that aspect of impersonal understanding, and they themselves turn to wanting to know something more about the personality of Godhead and his stories. And so there's a very interesting moment in the 2nd chapter, after Sutta has answered some of these questions, and he's in the process of explaining the answers to these 6 questions. He says that, Sangsidir Haritoshanam, that pleasing the Supreme Personality of God is the ultimate goal of life and the ultimate focus for all living beings. And then he says here, therefore, tasmat ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatang patihi shotavya kirtatavyascha dhyaya pujascha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Wow, this is really beautiful. We actually know some of these words. Manasa, ekena manasa, this one-pointed mind. We should shotav, kirtav, and dhyaya puja always. Now, Prabhupada gives something very, very interesting here. If realization of the absolute truth is the ultimate aim of life, of name, glorifying, hearing, worshipping are general occupation. So it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Brahmana or Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Sannyasi, Brahmachari, any status of life, we all are involved in glorifying, hearing, remembering, and worshipping. Without these principles of life, no one can exist. Activities of the living being involve engagements in these 4 different principles of life. Especially in modern society, all activities are more or less dependent on hearing and glorifying. Any man, now this is very interesting, any man from any social status becomes a well-known man in human society within a very short time If he's simply glorified truly or falsely in the daily newspapers, now you can add TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Basically, anyone becomes a big someone by these mediums. Sometimes, not to get it more specific, but Prabhupada is saying sometimes political leaders of a particular party are also advertised by newspaper propaganda. And by such a method of glorification, an insignificant man becomes an important man within no time. This is amazing. Prabhupada wrote this over 60 years ago, probably. This is the first canto, which he wrote before he left to the US. And you could already see the way the world was. But such propaganda by false glorification of an unqualified person cannot bring about any good, either for the particular man or for the society. That is powerful. There may be some temporary reactions to such propaganda, but there are no permanent effects. Therefore, such activities are a waste of time. The actual object of glorification is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has created everything manifested before us. And we have broadly discussed this fact from the beginning of Janmadhyasya, the sloka of the Bhagavatam, that is the first verse of the Bhagavatam. The tendency to glorify others or hear others must be turned to the real object of will bring. Making this clear distinction for us, that we have this aptitude, it's natural, but we should see what the result is when we project this onto some being of this world. Prabhupada says it's not good for them and it's not good for us, right? We see there's so much disappointment, especially in the age of Kali, where quarrel and hypocrisy and the inability to trust leadership, or the letting down of leadership, is such a common theme. People get so disturbed when their leaders, society, political community leaders tend to not fall short of those expectations. And that's largely due to this false glorification, this tendency to project people onto something that they're not. You look at some of these amazing shows, like big music events. I don't know if you've been to big events, but it's quite an energy when there's 50,000, 80,000 people, around one band or one person. If you look at even people are sometimes hysterical around certain fandom. Famously, Michael Jackson, there used to be people that would pass out. They would show ecstatic symptoms after, standing and listening to their great object of affection, sing and dance on the stage. People just had so much adoration. What we see is it is that natural state of the soul, which is infinite in its capacity to love and adore and worship. It is infinite, but it is being projected into a limited sphere. This material world is limited and it is ever changing. And when we try and project this sense of love and permanence onto a particular person or particular circumstance, we become frustrated, ultimately disappointed, and it becomes discouraging to who we are. And Prabhupada is saying here, if we can just shift that attention towards the Supreme Being, that will actually bring happiness. Now, what's really beautiful about this is that it's not something that we have to do in a strenuous way, but it's actually quite exciting that the stories of the Mahabharata, the stories of Ramayana, the stories of Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is just so many fascinating, interesting, and exciting stories that are there for us. All we have to do is give our attention to them. And as it was indicating in this section of the Bhagavatam, it is by that service to those who have that taste, by assisting them in their mission and being a part of their lives, that we can imbibe and we can inherit that same interest. And once that interest comes and we cultivate that through the process of hearing daily, regularly, and exploring this wonderful literature in a more personal way, we can become very much enlivened by that process. And this part of the Bhagavatam actually describes the whole journey of what it means to gain interest in hearing, once that hearing becomes a part of your life as a practice, and how Krishna in the heart will then remove the material desires and nature will become firmly established, and bhakti will become both of them. And you can see then one becomes fixed in their practice. And it all starts with this hearing process. So as we know that these stories bring so much excitement and transformational effect, we also know that people don't have time to read. I mean, if anybody has tried to distribute books, if you ever ask this question, do you read? You know, if you get lucky, if you're lucky enough to stop someone and have a conversation, you know, most of the time you'll find that, you know, the tendency of reading nowadays and hearing is becoming more and more, becoming less and less. And we're spending more and more time on TikTok and YouTube and all these video formats. And people are just used to more stimulating methods of receiving knowledge and entertainment. And so it is the responsibility of the devotees who have had this experience for themselves to bring that message in more and more dynamic and relevant ways. Our acharyas have always shown us this from the time of the Goswamis through Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Prabhupada himself. You know, at their time, the printing press, Bhaktisiddhanta even had the printing press put on the altar to glorify that this is the new Brihat Mridanga. This, through the printing press, we can now incarnate the message of the Godhead into books, and through books we can distribute it profusely. And likewise, when Prabhupada came, you know, that was his mission to really distribute books. And we know that it is so dear to his heart. And to this day, the BBT, there are millions of books that are being distributed. Everyone is a part of that journey. And it's really amazing when people can have that opportunity to connect to the literature and read for themselves. And we see that beyond just it being books, we know that the acharyas and our contemporary spiritual masters have always been finding more and more ways, relevant ways of taking this message. George now became so mainstream actually through songs. And he also really liked when the devotees were doing theaters and when they were doing plays and when they were celebrating the pastimes of the Lord in more and more creative ways. And now I just want to turn our attention to a bit of my own personal experience in this kind of space where taking the time out to bring the message of Krishna consciousness to others is really a very satisfying, rewarding, and exciting process. So I've got some photos here I'm going to share with you all. And I'm just going to take you through some of what happens in the Polish tour of Indradumna Swami. So here you're seeing what we would typically see from the stage. So if you were on the stage right now, you would see this audience. Practically every single day, these people would come during the summertime of June, July, August in Poland. And this is all around what's called the Baltic coastline. This particular town is called Międzyzdroje, and it's a beach town. And literally about 1 mile onto the left, you'll be at the beach. So these people have come because during the day, there was a Harinam party of about 30 devotees, very well dressed and lots of balloons and lots of instruments. And they were singing and dancing down the streets, distributing probably 5,000 to 8,000 flyers a day. And all these people came to the festival. The festival starts at 5 o'clock and it runs until 10 o'clock. And during those 5 hours, the entire spiritual world manifests here in this faraway little Polish town. And as you can see, there's lots of different tents. All those tents are representing different opportunities, just like we know the Rath Yatra formula. There's like a book tent, there's a discussion, question and answers tent. Here we have a pancake tent, we have a gift shop, we have where you can come and you can wear a sari. You can wear a sari for the day. You can get involved and get connected to the devotees in different ways. So we also see at the end there is Jagannath, because during this, thank you for telling us that, Ramesh. The Jagannath is also a very special feature. There's his chariot, and during the Woodstock event, which is a whole separate story, but during Woodstock, we actually pull the Jagannath down, and there are hundreds of thousands. In fact, more than 1 million people came in 2019. But the point is, I really want you to focus on the fact that if you look out into the stage here, and out into the audience, you'll see people wearing saris. I can tell you, not all of them are dasis, not all of them have been to temples, but many people are completely focused and enraptured on the stage right now. Isn't it amazing? Now, how do you get the audience of 300 or 400 people, 1,000 people? How do you get that attention for 5 hours? Well, nothing else than stories and characters. Here we see really nice dressed up characters having pictures. This is a picture with you could say an audience member, and these are actually manjaris, believe it or not, because they're part of one of Krishna's pastimes where the gopis and manjaris come out, and we find these different ways to bring about the stories that we know. This is this interesting story here. In the bottom left, you can see a great person kneeling down. That's actually Parikshit Maharaj, and behind him is Shukadev Goswami. And Shukadev Goswami is busy describing to him different stories that take entertaining and creative means. This particular style, is called a physical theater, where the actors are dressed quite plainly, similar to like the Bhagavad Gita play, if you've ever seen of Bhakti Marg Swami. The actors take the role of graphically depicting some of the messages that are said. So we have Shukadev and we have Parikshit, and then we also have Krishna and Radha. They're there, and beautiful Krishna, wonderfully painted up. It takes about 2 hours to prepare that Krishna, and you definitely don't want to get in her way backstage. And there she is, we're celebrating a particular pastime here in the theater, and we see that with the crowd, they become, you could say, they develop a relationship with these characters, just as we would with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But now, it's Krishna, it's Radharani, it's Ram and Sita. There we can see Radharani's walking away from Krishna in such deep emotion, such deep bhav. And those are fed up gopis at the back. They're kind of part of the Leela. And here's another tug of war. Here we see this is a moment that's taking place where Krishna is also kind of trying to rescue the situation. And there's different scenes. This is Krishna and Balaram, actually, because we also have these puppet shows where they come and they fight with these life-size puppets, and it actually goes off the stage, and people get to see, the gorilla or the different kinds of elephant demons, and so they fight and get a chance to just witness these pastimes in more and more relevant ways. Now, this is interesting. I don't know if you'll be able to tell who this is. Now, these characters are really dark, but there we actually see it's Sita. Sita is left there, and that's at the top with the red hair. That's actually Saponika in her more real form. And Saponika is she could actually see she has some nose trouble. She's there, and here they're ganging up, on Sita in this moment that she's feeling great separation. There she is with that face, and this play, the reminder of is the beginning and 40 minutes pure dance sequences, but we try and portray the characters through their movement. And of course, the demons are more metallic, kind of industrial, like dark, heavy dub sounds. As you can see, look at those faces, witches, and just like really bringing out, that like antagonist role. But then we also have the monkeys, the different special monkeys that are there in the pastimes, and they're a lot more joyful and happy and exciting, and they have more kind of different dances as well. This is very interesting because a lot of these other actors and actresses were from European countries or from the West. And here we have a dance group also from India that come and join us. And this is Banasura. He's found in the 10th canto, a very interesting pastime. The Banasura is there, and they perform a whole whole more traditional dance, but it's really elaborate costumes and makeup. Goodness, this makeup is intense. There's a whole battle of Kurukshetra happening behind the scenes, between the different artists establishing whose makeup is what and how they can get ready for the different scenes, but all done in service, of course. And here's some more dancer. Ultimately, this is Jatayu. Also, she dances a really incredible kind of contemporary dance style. And yeah, there's just more and more different ways in which these pastimes are brought. This is Nrsingadev, also really nicely done. Especially, we try and get it at a certain time of night where it's not daytime and it's not nighttime. It's around about 9 o'clock. The sun is sort of setting, but it hasn't set yet. And we show this Nrsingadev pastime. You had the Viva Cultura team. Yes, that's right. I remember that. Yeah, and you must have seen some of those activities. So yeah, these are different stories, and this is again Hanuman bringing the ring back to and narrating the whole story through his saxophone. Ultimately, we all want to learn how to play our part in this love story. It's not about us; it's about Krishna. And these stories really show to us these different opportunities that people can get a darshan of a higher reality. Here, this is called the Song of Grace, and it's a really beautiful depiction of the Bhagavad Gita story, but in a more modern context of a journey of a little girl who plays her violin and her journey to become the best violinist in the world. She hears some wise words from Grandma Grace, who departs to her the knowledge, the timeless wisdom of the Gita in a very, very relevant and special way. This play is really wonderful. I hope to show this in America sometime. But here you can see the reactions of the people, and it's really priceless, because just to see on their face, when we were performing the 2019 show for Song of Grace, people were standing, it was people were crying. You'd look back and you just see tears, just feeling so connected to these characters. And you also just witness how people can really connect to this if they're just given it in the right way. And one of the special things we do in the Bhagavatam, I don't know if we performed it in Ohio, but the character of Shukadev, when he walks onto the stage, he actually comes behind the audience. So they all of a sudden just feel a part of it. As he walks onto the stage, they lift him up. And then at the end, the narrator who's speaking, he speaks about this Bhagavatam, and the book actually does make a feature in the theater. And then he takes that book, and in the beginning he says, if I told you that you had 7 days left to live, what would you do? And then he describes the story of Parikshit, who was faced with the same question. And then at the end he says, so, if you had 7 days left to live, what would you do? And then he says, he repeats the same question. At the end, he takes that book, and his job to look during the show is to find an interested audience member and then actually hand them that Bhagavatam at the end. And it's amazing to see people receive the book. They'll oftentimes stand up, everybody will cheer. It's like a really exciting scene. But just amazing to create that moment of appreciation for this process, for these stories, for this literature, by the festival formula. And here you can see the phones are out, the excitement is there, the kids are captivated. I'll tell you one thing, it is really hard to keep the attention of children under the age of 5 for 45 minutes. But I can guarantee you that with the Govardhan pastime, with the Ramayan, with when Krishna kills the demons, they're there. And then one of the interesting ones we have is called Nandalal, where we bring all the kids onto the stage, and they have to they go on a journey to India, and they learn the different songs of India, and then we have them singing so many different mantras. But the kids are totally transformed. And what's amazing? This festival has been going on for 30 years. And I have met, older teenagers or people who are like 15, 16 or older that have grown up with the stories. And sometimes they'll ask us, they'll say, I thought the Ramayana was like this. How come you guys have changed it this year, And it's fascinating to see how they develop that interest. And just as we might have had when we were younger, some kind of traveling roadshow or circus event coming into our town. That's now the devotees bringing in these wonderful stories. And here's some more monkeys for you. The monkeys are the favorite. They really have some amazing dances, and they actually go into the audience and they play with people. They even take their phones and, kind of get really involved. This is a beautiful story. I hope one day we can show it there in Ohio, the Song of Grace. It is one of the most interesting presentations of the Gita you'd find in a very, very real life circumstance created. That's Saponika. She's pretty intense, pretty hardcore. And that's Parikshit. Parikshit in his final moments, oh my God. Rising up and the snake bird actually coming. And then it shows that at the end, he did not fear. He was not, wanting to do any other thing, but embrace his destiny, accept, and ultimately he was grateful for whatever came to him because he understood it to be the will of the Lord. And there he has the Bhagavatam to his heart. And that same book is available for everyone when we finish the whole story. So it's basically an amazing way of connecting people to this process. And I can highly recommend doing whatever we can in our own capacity to know that this is really the greatest treasure. These books, this literature, these stories, if you have an interest in them, if you have a kind of personal attachment, think of these creative ways in which you can share it with others. It is constantly appreciated by the acharyas, by our spiritual masters, and ultimately by Krishna when that sharing of the process is done. And I've found so much that, if it can just be fun and relevant, which it is, it always is, then you can really see it go very, very far. And we have so many people waiting on that Baltic coastline, so sad. I mean, the devotees are sad that we haven't had an opportunity to be together during this COVID time doing these shows. But I can tell you that the people are sad too. They're waiting for Krishna to come back to the Baltic coastline. And so, if we can see that with people who aren't practicing, how much more should it be for us? When definitely we know that this is the way that we can get to know the Lord more and more. And in this process, we can fill our own cup by hearing and being more and more exposed and ultimately sharing it with others. So that is a little bit of what I was excited to share with you all today, that this universe is not made up of atoms, it's made up of stories, and those ultimate stories are the stories of the Supreme Lord, these eternal stories that are always accessible, they're always there for us, and that we want to remember how wonderful they are and to prioritize it in our personal lives and try and make an effort to share it with others. So are there any comments or questions or any corrections? I'm very happy to hear your feedback. Rukmini Mataji has her hand up.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Prabhu, and really lively, and also brought us to mind of that the presentations that we saw here in Columbus. So, what is the best way, do you feel, in this time of COVID, to keep those stories alive and bring those to the people?
Jai, thank you so much. That's a wonderful question. Yeah, so I feel that I think this is an incredible device, personally. I feel that I know it's the cause of degradation for all humanity, and people are very distracted by just anything. Life and will kill. So I feel the same thing is there for technology. If you just think about, since I've observed just from a social kind of perspective, the increase that devotees have had online in the last year and a half, since COVID came. Just imagine how many Zoom sanghas, Zoom, whoever started Zoom is totally going back to Godhead. I mean, there must have been thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hours of devotional exchanges, that are happening within our communities. And we have found as COVID came and the whole world was so isolated and reduced to, sometimes just your room or your local, kind of, even now as an example, even though it's kind of almost post-COVID era, we still have an instance where we separated. But there are technologies out there that can keep us connected. And we should always understand that no matter what happens in this world, it is ultimately the will of the Lord. And if it's Krishna's will, I mean, I don't want to minimize any death and the kind of devastation that has taken place, whether it be personal or emotionally, etc. But the ultimate perspective is that the world is shifting, and we as a generation too are shifting, are observing an immense shift. And I feel like we need to optimize these mediums more in ways that will not only purify it, but also just make the best use of it. Because personally, I've found that it can be a very, it's one thing when there's nothing else, when there's nothing else, like today, we can't go and meet anyone, but at least we have the Zoom. So that's one way of looking at it, but also to understand that I believe if Prabhupada or Bhaktisiddhanta was with us, just like the typewriter was glorified to a certain extent, I'm sure that the internet and the iPhone and all that can be done, with these mediums. So I don't think that we necessarily need to over endeavor. Personally, I feel it depends on each person, your nature. TikTok or YouTube or whatever, there's so many things, there's going to be more and more. Try to balance that with an equal bit of time of the Krishna conscious activity, either by spending time following those people who are actually sharing on those platforms, and also, like, I think that's one element, to do it like that, and to see where our responsibility or roles may be to connect people in those ways. But ultimately, I feel that it should stem from a genuine place. Like, I don't think we should artificially do this. I think that, it would be best if when you wake up in the morning, you don't grab your phone and you don't spend the first half an hour scrolling, and rather have the Bhagavad Gita with you. Like, nowadays, I put more emphasis on books. I mean, I know there's so many wonderful things, like the database is all there, but there's a tendency to be reading something and then all of a sudden a notification comes and the mind is lost. So I believe that we have to protect our own selves with the natural parts of the process. And once that is, properly fortified and nourished, we can step into a space of sharing. If we're hopelessly attached, then I would, recommend finding ways or people to follow, purify, and get connected to those different mediums. But from the ultimate preacher's perspective, I feel like we have to adapt with these enterprising technologies. I don't think we need to sell out to them. I don't necessarily think that it's advancement of human society, but I do feel like it's where human consciousness is. And I've seen devotees make incredible progress during this last year and a half. I've seen people come in touch with devotional service who would otherwise never have, because we've been more present. We're sharing our lives, we're sharing our experiences. There's just so much more community online nowadays. And I feel like it's actually quite exciting. And if it's natural for us to be spending more and more. So regular Zoom sanghas, readings, just sometimes I have a few groups of WhatsApp where we would just read to each other, and then they would pick up from the next, few pages down. You can just hear so much more now with these amazing AirPods. And like I like exercising now, not because I exercise, but because it's a time that I can actually listen. I get to listen to more things when I exercise, when we're driving, when we're getting ready in the morning, even when we're in the shower. We have amazing, I've got my JBL here, it booms incredible transcendental sounds. So it's just about making the best of a bad bargain, seeing the gold in the dirty place, and seeing how we can transform these mediums. And I think it'll become more and more specific according to each of our various life circumstances and responsibilities. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I love your positive attitude, and I agree with you that everything happens by Krishna's will, and there are. So I also tend to like paper books, as you mentioned, but there has been a lot opened up through these Zoom sessions, and I just wanted to throw a couple ideas out there also. So I have seen a video game. I played a bit of it. I didn't finish it, but it was really interesting that in this video game, a person basically they have their own spaceship and they go through the universe to different places, and there's a story, and the story is just sort of so the person has a robot with them, so they're in dialogue with the robot, and actually the dialogues, like, you can sort of choose them, but they're sort of pre-canned. So basically the whole story, which is going to be turned into it is a novel basically, but it's in a video game that's on a spaceship. So an idea that came to me, but it's certainly beyond me, but maybe somebody can take it up, is that if someone was traveling with Narada, then the Bhagavatam could be a video game like that, where you're traveling with the transcendental spaceman to all these different pastimes, and so you have a sense that you have choice because you decide where to go when, but actually then when you get there, then the story sort of unfolds as it does in the Bhagavatam. So I'm just throwing it out there because maybe somebody, maybe you or somebody or somebody in the audience will take that up. And another medium that I found recently, and I'm sort of don't know what to think of it, is called Clubhouse, where people just there's no recordings, and people have rooms, and they just hang out in rooms, and it's audio only. So there's a lot of power to the transcendental sound vibration. So I was on it a few times, but it sort of helps to have like a moderator. But that's another new medium where we could be like reading scriptures on Clubhouse. But yeah, there's so many mediums. Anyway, so I'll let other people
think,
ask their questions.
I'll just give one technical detail on something you're speaking of, which it's kind of the next step. But as these technologies emerge, there is like an uncharted territory. There's unclaimed land, as it were. And if you think about it, even the internet, about 30 years ago, 1995, when it started, it was something. When the rise of social media started, it was something. And I feel the devotees as a community, we weren't either just, quite there yet, or maybe it wasn't as relevant for us. But we do witness now that if you get to these platforms sooner, you can claim the land. Like, why is it that if you type in Kirtan on Google, you don't get our representation of Kirtan necessarily? It's taken a long time, for us to really be more present in many ways. Kirtan Bhakti, we should be owning meditation. We should be, everything that is in spiritual categories should very much be under our domain. I don't just say that out of, just pride, but it's just because we have the most authentic presentation of that. So whether it be something like Clubhouse, which has emerged not even a year, it's like a year now, and it's something that probably doesn't have a huge devotee representation on it, but neither did Instagram, neither did TikTok, neither did Facebook many years back. But eventually it gets adopted by the people no matter what. So you can, I don't want to like push this because I don't think it's relevant for everyone, but depending on how enterprising you are as a preacher, you can see those platforms and see that basically, 500 years ago, people were traveling the world, claiming land, colonizing physical land through traveling the ocean. Now the land is what it is, and now there's this, this digital realm. The digital realm is the new space of colonialization, where people are claiming land for, and it's definitely, there's a gold rush. There's a lot of things happening in the air right now. In fact, it's quite passionate. The metaverse is emerging, a whole new frontier of internet activity and involvement. So, we can just stand and watch it go by, say it's Maya, until somebody's using it properly, or we can be a person that is instrumental in those ways. And I've found that when you use technologies, not only is it impressive and it is like up to date with convincing people in different ways, but you get the ownership of those of those subjects or of that content, you could say. And then you don't have to be fighting with people who are just pretenders or, not as complete in that presentation. So anyway, it's a very interesting topic. I'm spending a lot of time in the last 6 months. I've only been online in the last year and a half myself, and I'm discovering so much more. And I'm realizing that, somebody has to take up this service, but it definitely, as I was saying, it should be fortified. It shouldn't be, at the expense of your personal practice, and it shouldn't be artificial. I don't know.
Just something you said about 1995. I actually remember 1995. I guess I'm showing my age here, but when I first started looking for content on the internet, devotional content, it was the people who got on. They were all people who were just slandering Vaishnavas. The people who it was just like VaishnavaParad.com, and I was like, oh no, this is terrible. I'm not going to look at devotional content at all on the internet. I'll just, put that in a box. Unfortunately, not everyone was like me, and then other people then started putting so many wonderful things on, and now there's so much devotional content. So what you're saying about if you don't claim that territory, somebody else is going to. That was definitely, I can say from my own memory that's what happened early on, and I'm glad that there's some people who are doing that. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's more time for another hand. I see.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, but first I would like to thank you for showing such wonderful pictures from the events, and the photography of Ananta Vrindavan Prabhu is just out of the world. But thank you, Prabhu, for sharing all of that. Prabhu, I had a couple of questions. One is, you mentioned about creativity, how one can be as creative and attract people to Krishna consciousness as they can. And even during the time of Prabhupada appreciated devotees being creative and bringing these dramas and stage performances. So I was wondering, now a lot of devotees try to be creative and definitely go out of the box a lot of times, and don't go in a very traditional way, that have not been done before. So even but the idea is the same, to attract people. Now some people some people don't like their approaches. So do you see any boundaries to how creative should one get, and if there is any wrong approach to being creative? That's question one. And then second question I wanted to ask was, through these creative ways, then how do you take them to next level? Like storytelling is perfect time for, we just had Kartik month, which was just month of leelas and pastimes. But then how do you take them to next stage, if they are expecting just stories all the time, and then then more devotional services, more philosophy, and like advancing from there? What are your approaches on that? You are on mute.
Interesting questions. I really appreciate it. I just want to make sure I have time to answer them. Hare, Prabhu?
Yeah, you're good, Prabhu.
So firstly, I understand you wanting to know about the relationship with like our creative energy, and knowing that it's rightly situated. Is that what you're saying? Like, is it part of Krishna's desire, and is this really devotional, and how far do you go? I'm reminded of this of one of the most creative personalities in our universe, none other than Brahma himself. I always feel like whenever you're wondering about things, whether it be leadership, family, work, different, circumstances, do look for the examples that we have. And the Bhagavatam has many examples, the Chaitanya Charitamrita has many examples, and Prabhupada's Leelamrita has many examples. But here's something really deep and a good shastric grounding for what I want to say. Tam bhakti yoga paribhavata hit saroja aseshu tekshita patona nanata pungsam yad diyata urugaya vibhava yanti hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. Now, it's very interesting. This is Lord Brahma before he's about to, in his cosmic creation, he has these prayers to Krishna. And if you read a bit about his creative process, you will see that he has an alignment with the Lord that is firstly established. To know that it says here, the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and the heart becomes, we can see him through hearing, and the heart becomes cleansed. So and then it says that the Lord comes in the form in which they welcome him, which is really esoteric, but also interesting to know that, in our outreach, in our efforts to bring, whether it be festivals, programs, or even classes, that this is an opportunity for Krishna to manifest. And we want to welcome the Lord, through our own practice. Like, there are 26 qualities of a devotee. And it's said that, being a kavi, being a poet, being artistic, these things come as a natural concomitant factor of our devotion. So what I'm saying is that you don't have to feel too intimidated about the form. Just focus on the substance. The substance is in your personal practice, in your personal conviction, in your experience. Once that is established, your creativity will flow. You will see more and more ways, more and more ideas will come to you. Obviously, associating with different kinds of people, like-minded association will kind of complement that. Of course, we want to verify. Like, very few big things that I do that I don't check with my spiritual master or, shikshas. Like if I want to launch a song or a video concept, or if I'm going to do an event, I usually verify. But at a certain point, we get an understanding of how to bring Krishna consciousness. And the creativity is, rather than thinking that it has to be something incredible or revolutionary or unique, just make it unique to you. People respond so much more nowadays to what is authentic and what is real. And there's no point in pretending to be something, because that's the way it should be done. Whether it be an Instagram story post or a WhatsApp message to your friends, or like an opportunity. For example, it was Kartik month, the Kartik month's a great time we can reach out to people. Next month is Gita Jayanti. We can, so many ideas can come around Gita Jayanti. It's also like it's a calendar day. It's like an excuse to at least tell somebody that this is happening. Would you like to? And we don't necessarily have to just drop Gitas on people's heads, but maybe you can, like what I do with a lot of group of people is I read the whole thing, the whole Gita. We read just the English from start to finish. Because I can tell you, for many people, especially Westerners, doing the Sanskrit might be, purifying, but it's very difficult for them. And sometimes, like, they may not develop the actual interest and attachment that you want after reciting the whole thing. So if you read it in English with college students or people who are intellectually inclined, it takes you not more than 3 hours, three and a half hours in a group of people, just the verses. Their darshan of the Gita is just so much more deeper and more established, and that doesn't require a whole festival, a whole play. So I think creativity doesn't need to be looked in terms of a specific form of entertainment, but rather about how the devotee finds the ways to share the message. That's the idea. But he likes to organize or bring people together, facilitate, so he called me up and we spoke and we were talking about the mindfulness to mantra event. And now that's a whole event, a whole retreat that's created for people, and we have different roles in these things. So I don't think you have to feel too intimidated by having to do a certain thing. Find your role and your kind of domain, your sphere of actual influence and concern, and try and find a way that you can do something, because it doesn't have to become an entire festival or theater production, or you don't have to become a film composer, music composer, film. I mean, for some of it, it's like that. Like, I know certain levels of my responsibilities and potential is not being met personally, and I need to up my game a lot more. But I can say there's different complementary features we find with different people that do that. So I would focus on your personal, your cup being full, and let that overflow direct you, and don't minimize what it means to have one-to-one connections. People are actually way much neglecting and undervaluing. We're looking at social media and numbers, 100 people, 1,000 people, million people, all these views. But like, the fact is that with this phone, you can reach out to 20 people in the space of an hour personally, with their name and a verse for them that you chose, or something that you feel might be helpful for them, or a realization that you had. So I think that there's a lot of creativity in all those things, and I feel that finding the examples, whether it be Lord Brahma, Srila Prabhupada himself, or our contemporary leaders, we can take the cue of seeing that we have our part to play, like the different Lord Ram was crossing over to Lanka, the ocean, and there were so many people involved, dropping mountains and dropping pebbles, right? But like, it was all according to the capacity of the individual. That's what Krishna appreciates. What is your capacity? What is your potential? And how is and I feel like we should embrace part of that connection, and not be shy to share it in ways that we feel comfortable with, in whoever's nearby, and in whatever way, all these mediums, etc. Okay, was that okay?
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
I don't know if I got both your questions, but it was very broad topics. So
yeah, kind of. Yeah, it covered both. How we can bring them closer. So personal connection is definitely a way to go. Yeah, from there. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Premananda Kirtan Prabhu. Amazing, very amazing discourse, and so many nice points. So I don't have any words to describe the subject which you have discussed today. So thank you so much, and interacted. And we definitely hope to see you sometime in the future in person here, with your whole troupe of music. I think you are also very good in music. So thank you so much. And with this, we will conclude our session today. The only local announcement I had, unless if somebody else had any announcements, we had like the 11:30, that is Tuesday, is Utpanna Ekadasi. So fasting from grains and beans. And if anybody wants to join the Ekadasi Kirtan, please let me know. So other than that, Hari, you wanted to say something, or we can conclude today's session?
I would just like to appreciate and thank Premananda Kirtan Prabhu again for carving some of his time out and coming and speaking to us. I like that it was a very it was philosophically based, but it was also a very practical session about how the effect of stories has on all of us. So thank you so much for that, and all that service that you're doing. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, everybody. So Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyavacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo. Antakoti Vaishnav Vrindiki Jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.